The last time I spoke to you was 3 years ago, and I'm still not divorced yet. So just imagine if you'd been billing me for all these hours. I have been through several lawyers and several adventures, but most of the action has been on the French side. So it's I can say nothing's happened, or you could say the different attempts at getting a resolution have failed. But that's basically why that was. The most recent lawyer we employed was a very, very expensive international lawyer who had experience in both doing international human rights cases and international corporate law between France and Canada. He had absolutely no experience with divorce law whatsoever. And it went wonderfully. It went wonderfully for him. He ran up quite a lot of bills and nothing was resolved. So as you know, I mean, it's true of my case, but it's true of all these cases in general. When you just do the Canadian side, it's very simple. And I'd basically be happy with any outcome as long as it ends up with me being divorced. Like, I'm really not fussy about the details. I just want to get divorced already. But the reason for trying to do it on the French side, which is more complicated, was the hope that I would get a better custody arrangement in terms of actually visiting and spending time with my daughter. And as per my understanding, I think basically nothing will happen on the Canadian side about that. Like, the Canadian side can divorce me, they can nullify the marriage, but they're not going to dictate terms for me to actually visit or spend time with my daughter, right? No, it's been more than a year now that I haven't seen her. I have to use my words somewhat carefully here. There was an arrangement imposed on us. So, normally you use terms like a negotiated settlement or something, but there was no negotiated settlement. There was earlier paperwork that declared me missing without a trace, which is legally dead. And then I had to challenge that and overturn that. And in response to my challenging my status as missing or legally dead, the court gave us a writ. It just gave us a mandate for visitation hours, which is, of course, much better than nothing. But there wasn't, a discussion or negotiation, what have you. And I think none of us realized, like everything in France, there was a best before date on that. After just a few months, that elapsed. So I made fully 4 visits to France to see my daughter, 2 visits a year for 2 years. And then I think actually the paperwork elapsed long before that. But my ex-wife figured out that the paperwork had elapsed and that agreement didn't have any legal validity anymore. So since then, I've been unable to see my daughter. And none of it's valid anymore. All that stuff has elapsed. So it was all temporary paperwork. And again, to even describe it as a court order is a bit surreal. So there's no currently valid paperwork. That's another irony. So my status in France, we're not separated. We're just married. So currently in France, I have all the rights of the father because we're not even, like, legally, we're not separated. We're not estranged. There's no valid paperwork. We're at step 1 or step 0, where we're still just a married couple on paper. Yeah, because after a certain time elapses for the paperwork she filed, then that becomes invalid, and you're just treated as a married couple. So we're just man and wife. And she, I'm not complaining, but she's had a child with another man. I'm happy for her. I'm happy for her to move on with her life. But legally in France, that's considered my child because she's still married to me. This is one of the reasons to get legally divorced is you can be facing the presumption because, I'm married to her. Yeah, I'm sure you know that is most jurisdictions. If you're married to someone, it's presumed to be your child unless you do paperwork saying, that's not my child. We were separated for more than 5 years before she got pregnant. So yeah, I mean, we've been separated for years and years and years, but legally, none of that exists in France. Oh, to say she doesn't cooperate, to say my ex-wife doesn't cooperate is an understatement. That's probably good news for where you're at because my ex-wife's current strategy is just to refuse to reply. So she doesn't reply to email. Her lawyers don't reply to email. I think they will probably drag their feet and do nothing as the Canadian side of the case unfolds. So, as I say, I would assume it'll lead to a default kind of uncontested judgment on the Canadian side. Well, you tell me, but I thought that was basically impossible because the Canadian side can't order the French government to do anything. Again, you are the expert. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's the Canadian divorce, and then as I understand it, child custody would be a separate French matter. I've just returned to Canada in the middle of the coronavirus period. I was living in Taiwan before this. So the assumption is that I'm now going to return to University of Victoria. My ability to speak Chinese has improved since the last time you spoke to me. That's really the main progress in my life. So we assume that's going to be the case. If I join the French Foreign Legion, if I suddenly get employed one way or the other, you'll be the first to know. I also have income from my fabulous YouTube career. I'm an internet personality, so I make a couple $100 a month. So maybe $300 or $400 a month comes out of my YouTube career. But yeah. Oh no, I declare it. No, I do. Whenever I fill out tax returns, I put in how much money I've earned from YouTube. Yes, so I'm paid both directly by YouTube Corporation, which is Google Corporation, and I'm also paid by Patreon, which is the crowdsourcing platform, and I can tell you exactly how much that is. It's just relative to the Canadian tax system. It's very little. It's a few $100s here and there. So obviously I think of that as a hobby, but it is income. Believe me, I'm not fussy. I'm happy with any divorce I can get. I really want to get on with my life, and I'm not expecting perfection here. It's I'm not fussy. Yep. I've volunteered to pay in the past. My ex-wife is refusing to do that because that's the way she's choosing to play the game. So yeah, I have sent her emails, and I could prove that, offering to pay child support. But my ex-wife, her strategy is to refuse to do that. That's how she first treated me, as dead, as missing in action. And then now also it lets her just not be in communication with me and just not let me see my daughter. Because if she were receiving child support from me, then she would have to allow me to spend time with my daughter under the usual system of custody and visitation. So it's her way of avoiding one half of the system, but then she avoids the other half also. And I'm completely happy to pay whatever the court assigns to me. So I just say, I have no complaints that way. If the court decides that I'm rich and I should pay a lot, or they decide that I'm poor, I'm completely happy with whatever the court decides is appropriate.